The First Muslim by Leslie Hazelton. Mohammad falls ill. The illness began just a few weeks after his return to Medina. At first it seemed to be another of those migraine-like attacks, and everyone expected it to pass after a day or two, maybe 3 at the most. Except it didn't. It came and went, but each time it returned it seemed worse. And then a fever developed, and with it the headaches intensified, stabbing down the back of Mohammed's neck in paralyzing spasms. At his insistence, his wives took him to Aisha's room, and then he lay on the raised stone sleeping ledge while they took turns nursing him. It was the end of May, and the heat of the early desert summer made the small room stifling, even for someone in full health. But Mohammed's was rapidly deteriorating as a blinding sensitivity to noise and light developed along with fever and the terrible head pain. The light could be dealt with by hanging a rug over the doorway, but quiet was not to be had. Aisha's room was now a sick room, and in the Middle East, then as now, a sick room was a gathering place. Relatives, companions, aides, supporters, all those claiming closeness to the center of power, came in a continual stream, day and night, with concerns, advice, questions. Even sick, Mohammed could not ignore them. Too much depended on him. The wives wrapped his head in clothes soaked in cold water, hoping to draw out the fever and ease the pain. But if there was any relief, it was only temporary. As his condition worsened, the women must have realized that this was neither a passing fever nor another migraine, but a disease that had been known throughout the Middle East since the start of recorded history. Headache roams over the desert, billowing like the wind, reads an ancient Sumerian incantation. Flashing like lightning, it is loosed above and below. Bright as a heavenly star, it comes like the dew. It stands hostile against the wayfarer, scorching him like the day. This man it has struck and feeds on him, like a dread windstorm bound in death. This was no mere headache, but a fatal disease. And indeed the symptoms and duration of Mohammed's final illness, 10 days, are classic for bacterial meningitis. There's no knowing exactly how he contracted it. Some of his followers would suspect it was the result of his night vigils in the graveyard, which had resumed on returning from Mecca. They'd remember him talking to the dead, saying, "Peace upon you, O people of the graves," and promising to join them. God has called another of his servants to him, and soon he will obey the call. Certainly his exhaustion, exacerbated by the stress of government, had made him more vulnerable to infection. So perhaps had the head injury he'd suffered at the Battle of Uhud, since bacteria can enter the skull through a hairline fracture, inflaming the protective membrane of the brain and spinal cord known as meninges. Even today, meningitis is often fatal. In the 7th century, long before antibiotics, it was almost universally so. Yet despite Mohammed's clear indication during the Hajj that he did not expect to live much longer, despite that nighttime promise to join the dead, despite even the clearly worsening symptoms, it would not be until the 10th and final day of his illness that anyone seemed able to openly acknowledge that he was dying.